It started with a crayon drawing on the refrigerator. My daughter, Lily, is 5 years old. Like most kids her age, she loves to draw stick figures with smiling faces, animals that look like potatoes with legs, rainbows with too many colors. I always praised her art and displayed it proudly, cluttering the fridge door with magnets and paper scraps. But one afternoon, I came home from work and found a new picture stuck there. It was different. The figures were still drawn in crayon, but they weren't smiling. They stood in a line, their heads too large, their eyes just black dots. And most unsettling of all, there were 6 people. There are only 3 of us in the family: me, my husband, Greg, and Lily. I called Lily over. "Sweetie, who are these people?" She beamed. "That's our family." "But there are 6 people here," I said, pointing. "Who are the other 3?" She didn't hesitate. "Grandpa William, Auntie Ruth, and baby Charlie." I froze. Those names meant nothing to me. No one in either of our families was named William, Ruth, or Charlie. Greg walked in behind me and glanced at the picture. "That's a lot of people," he muttered. "Do those names mean anything to you?" I asked. He shook his head. "Not a clue." That night, as I was getting Lily ready for bed, I brought it up again. "Where did you hear those names, honey?" She looked at me like I was silly. "They live in the house." I stopped mid-brushstroke through her hair. "What do you mean?" She shrugged. "Sometimes they come out when it's dark, but only when I'm awake." I forced a smile. "Are they your imaginary friends?" She giggled. "No, Mommy, they're real. They just don't want you to see them." When night fell, a sense of unease descended upon me. That night, for the first time, I left my door open, listening intently for any sound coming from Lily's room. That night, I barely slept. Every creak of the old floorboards, every groan of the house settling felt sharper, like something was moving when it shouldn't be. I told myself it was just my imagination. A child's drawing shouldn't be enough to disturb me this much, but something about the certainty in Lily's voice, it gnawed at me. Around 2 a.m., I got up to check on her. Her door was open, the hall dimly lit by the nightlight. I stepped inside quietly. She was curled under the blankets, breathing softly. I leaned down and kissed her forehead. Then I noticed the drawings on her wall. Dozens of them. I hadn't seen them before. She must have been doing them when we weren't paying attention. Each one showed the same 3 extra figures, in different scenes. One showed Auntie Ruth brushing Lily's hair while she sat on the floor. Another showed Grandpa William standing by her closet, his eyes larger than normal and hollow. The last one made me shiver. It was Lily in bed, and baby Charlie was under her bed, his hand sticking out like he was crawling out from beneath. I backed away, trying not to make a sound. I would ask her in the morning. Maybe it was just a phase, something she saw in a cartoon or a story she made up in her head. But deep down, I already knew it wasn't. The next morning at breakfast, I sat Lily down with her cereal and asked gently, "Lily, honey, can you tell me more about Grandpa William?" She looked up, chewing thoughtfully. "He's really tall, and he doesn't like when you stand behind him." "Why?" "He says it reminds him of the fire." I blinked. "What fire?" She shrugged and went back to her Cheerios like she hadn't just said something bone-chilling. "And Auntie Ruth?" I asked. Lily grinned. "She sings to me when it's windy. Her dress makes this swoosh sound like leaves." Greg looked up from his phone. "Is this more of that imaginary friend thing?" "She says they're not imaginary," I said quietly. Greg chuckled. "She also said she saw Santa in the backyard last December." But I wasn't laughing. Something about these names, these stories, they didn't feel like make-believe. There was too much detail, too much consistency. That evening, while Greg took Lily to the park, I searched our attic. I don't know what I was looking for. Maybe something left behind by previous owners, something that would make sense of all this. What I found chilled me to the bone. A box. Inside were old photographs, faded, curling at the edges. One caught my eye immediately, a black and white picture of a family standing in front of our house. There were 6 people. A man, tall and stern, A woman in a long dress, a small baby on her hip, and three children. On the back, written in faded ink, the Sutter family, William Ruth Charles, 1929. I sat down hard on the attic floor, the photos shaking in my hand. My daughter wasn't making them up. She was seeing people who used to live here, and they weren't gone. Not completely. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept the photograph beside my bed, staring at the names on the back like they might change. William, Ruth, Charles, the exact names Lily had given me. She couldn't have known. There was no way. Greg still believed it was a coincidence, a child's overactive imagination, but I knew better now. I woke up around 3:12 a.m. to a strange sound, like humming, soft, melodic, a woman's voice. It was coming from Lily's room. My heart thumped as I crept down the hallway. The door was cracked open. The song grew clearer, like a lullaby from another time. I slowly pushed the door open. The room was empty, except for Lily, fast asleep in bed, but the closet door was open. I walked over, trembling, and peeked inside. Nothing but clothes and toys. Then I noticed something chilling. On the floor of the closet, drawn in red crayon, was a circle. Inside the circle were stick figures, 4 of them. One was clearly Lily. The other 3 were labeled in a child's messy handwriting. Me, Grandpa William, Auntie Ruth, Baby Charlie, and around the edges of the circle she had written a phrase over and over. They said I belong. They said I belong. They said I belong. The next morning I took the photo I found in the attic to the local library. I didn't tell Greg. He was starting to think I was obsessing. And maybe I was, but I needed answers. The town's historical archives were kept in the basement. The woman behind the desk was kind but skeptical as I showed her the photo. "Do you recognize this family?" I asked. She squinted at the image. "Sutter family. That rings a bell. Hold on." She returned 15 minutes later with a dusty folder. "They used to live on Oak Ridge Lane," she said. "Your address. The family had a bit of a reputation." "What do you mean?" "There were rumors, strange things. The youngest child, Charles, went missing. They never found him. Some people believed he fell into the well behind the house. Others thought it was something else. Darker." My throat tightened. "And the rest of the family?" She hesitated. "There was a fire. The father, William, was found in the living room, burned alive. Ruth died in the upstairs hallway, trying to get to Charles." A knot formed in my stomach. When did this happen? 1929. They say the house stood empty for decades after that. Some said it was cursed. Eventually, someone rebuilt it. Must have been before your time. I nodded silently. Cursed. My daughter was drawing pictures of ghosts. Ghosts who thought she belonged, and I was starting to believe them. I left the library with shaking hands, clutching the folder of documents like it was a life raft. I barely made it to my car before tears welled up. How was I supposed to protect my daughter from something I couldn't see? From a family that no longer existed, at least not in the way we understand. That night, I didn't mention any of it to Greg. He kissed me on the cheek, told me to try and get some rest. I nodded, faked a smile, and climbed into bed with Lily's crayon drawing folded under my pillow like a protective charm. But I didn't sleep. At 2:48 a.m., I heard it again, humming. This time, I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my phone and walked straight into Lily's room, camera app open, heart thudding like a drum. She was sitting up in bed, not asleep, just staring at the closet. Her mouth was moving, mimicking the melody, note for note. "Lily?" I whispered. She turned slowly, her eyes unfocused. "Auntie Ruth says the fire wasn't supposed to happen." My skin went cold. "Baby Charlie is cold all the time," she added, like it was a complaint. "He likes it when I sit in the circle." I approached her gently. "Sweetheart, who told you to draw that?" She blinked once, then pointed at the closet. "They don't like being forgotten." I couldn't breathe. My phone slipped from my hand and landed screen up, still recording. As I leaned down to scoop Lily into my arms, the closet door slammed shut with a bang. I jumped. Then, the whispering started. From inside the closet, a low, indistinct muttering. Dozens of voices layered over one another like a broken radio frequency. I yanked the door open. Nothing. No voices, just toys and folded sweaters. But on the wall at the back of the closet, something had been drawn, with soot. 4 handprints, 1 small, 3 large, all overlapping, and underneath them, scratched faintly into the drywall. We remember her. The next day, I took Lily to stay at my sister's house an hour away. Greg thought I was overreacting. He always does. But I couldn't stay in that house another night, not until I knew what the hell was happening. While Greg went to work, I returned to the attic. This time I brought gloves and a flashlight. There was more buried in the insulation: old photos, brittle news clippings, burned scraps of paper. But one item chilled me to my core: a journal belonging to Ruth Sutter. The entries were short, disjointed, fragmented over time, like a mind unraveling. Charles keeps crying at night, says he sees the mirror man. William doesn't sleep anymore, just watches the walls. There's a voice behind the mirror. It told me secrets. We were chosen. We were chosen. The final entry was dated 3 days before the fire. The door behind the closet is waking up again. I lowered the journal, staring at the floorboards beneath my knees. A door. Behind the closet? There was something hidden in that room. Something Lily was already too close to. I waited until Greg was asleep that night before returning to Lily's room. She wasn't home, thank God. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that buzzed in your ears and made the shadows feel heavier than they should. I turned on the overhead light and pushed aside the contents of her closet. There was a thin layer of dust on the hardwood floor, undisturbed except for the tiny footprints she must have left. And right where the journal hinted, behind the closet wall, I found it, a faint outline in the drywall, a seam, barely visible unless you were looking for it. I pressed against it. Nothing. But when I knocked, it echoed hollow. I grabbed a screwdriver from the garage and began prying at the edges. Plaster cracked, flakes fell. After a few minutes, a small square section of the wall popped loose, and behind it, darkness. A crawl space, maybe 3 feet wide. Cold air flowed out in a wave, carrying with it a smell I can only describe as old and wrong, like mildew mixed with burnt fabric and something sweet rotting underneath. I hesitated, then crawled inside. The tunnel extended for maybe 10 feet. At the end, a wooden hatch sealed with rusted iron bolts. Carved into the hatch were symbols I didn't recognize: circles, lines, spirals, and words, scratched in shaky, frantic handwriting. Do not open until the last child forgets. I didn't open it. I crawled backward out of that space, shaking. Whatever was in there, it wasn't meant to be found. Not by me, not by Lily, but someone or something wanted her to remember. The next day, I contacted a local historian. I needed to know everything about the Sutter family, every record, every rumor, every tragedy. She agreed to meet me at the town archive. Her name was Marion, and the moment I said Ruth Sutter, her eyes darkened. She was part of a fringe spiritualist group, Marion said, flipping through old records. This town doesn't talk about it much, but there were events, fires, children disappearing, strange behavior. She showed me a newspaper from 1972. The headline read, "Family vanishes in tragic house fire. No bodies found." Below it, a photo of Ruth Sutter. She looked almost identical to Lily. Same eyes, same jawline, same haunted look. Marion leaned closer. Some say they weren't killed. They say they crossed over, whatever that means. Crossed over? Into what? And why was Lily the one seeing them now? That night, I received a new drawing. It was waiting on my pillow when I got home. Lily hadn't been home all day, but the drawing was unmistakably hers. Same crayon pressure, same signature in the corner. It showed our house, but darker, twisted, and in every window of the house, a pale face stared out, eyes black and hollow. On the roof sat a small girl with yellow hair. Underneath, she had written, "They live in the walls. They just want to come back." I didn't sleep that night. The drawing sat on my nightstand like a threat. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those hollow faces pressed against the glass of my memory. By sunrise, I had made a decision. Whatever was in this house, it had to be confronted. Avoiding it, fearing it, denying it. It was only making it stronger. I had to go back into that crawl space. I had to open the hatch. Greg left early for work. I watched from the window as his car disappeared down the road, then grabbed a flashlight and the screwdriver again. My heart thudded as I returned to Lily's room. The crawl space felt colder this time, like the house knew what I was planning. I climbed in, dragging the light behind me. The hatch waited at the end, just as I'd left it. Symbols still scrawled into the wood. Words still etched like a warning. Do not open until the last child forgets. I hesitated only a second longer. Then I unlatched the bolts. They creaked open with a metallic groan that echoed down the tunnel. The hatch door swung back. Inside was darkness. At first, I thought it was just another empty space, but then the smell hit me. Thick, sweet, putrid. It coiled down my throat, made me gag. And then the light flickered over something. A doll, no, a body. Tiny, with porcelain skin. Its face painted on crudely, like a child's attempt at a real person. But its eyes were real. Human, dead. Dozens of them, stacked in a half circle around the edges of the chamber like offerings. All child-sized. All with those horrible, open, glassy eyes staring at me. My scream caught in my throat. Then I saw it. In the center of the chamber, a chair, and in that chair something was growing. It wasn't human, not completely. It had the outline of a child, but its proportions were wrong. Its arms too long, its head tilted too far to one side like its neck had been broken and never healed. Its hair was stringy and yellow, matted with black. It opened its eyes and smiled. "Hi, Mommy," it whispered. I scrambled backward, hit my head on the tunnel wall, and kicked until I was free. I resealed the hatch. I ran. I didn't stop until I was outside the house, bent over the front lawn, gasping for air, hands shaking so badly I couldn't call Greg for 10 minutes. That night, I didn't go back inside. I booked a motel down the road and stared at the ceiling, replaying that voice in my head. "Hi, Mommy." How did it know? What did it want? And more importantly, why did it sound exactly like Lily? The motel room was sterile, beige, and safe. Or at least, that's what I told myself as I sat on the bed, staring at the wall, phone clutched in my hand. I hadn't called the police. What could I even say? "Hi, I found a chamber of doll-like corpses and a child thing that called me Mommy." They'd think I was insane. Maybe I was, but one thing I knew for certain, that thing under the house wasn't done with us. Lily hadn't drawn anything else since that day. She was quiet, withdrawn. Her appetite had dropped. She didn't want to sleep. When I asked her why, she whispered, "Because they come when I dream." I swallowed hard. "Who comes, sweetheart?" She stared at me, wide-eyed. "The family. The ones that look like me." I drove back to the house the next morning. I didn't want to. Every instinct screamed against it. But I had to get Lily's things. We weren't staying there another night. Greg was already home. He stood at the edge of the driveway, looking confused. "Why didn't you come back?" he asked. I told him everything. The drawing, the crawl space, the hatch, the body. His face went pale. "I thought that room was sealed," he muttered. "They said it was sealed." "Who's they?" He hesitated. "The sellers. They made me sign some extra paperwork, non-disclosure stuff. I thought it was about mold or termites or something." I stared at him in disbelief. "You didn't think it was worth mentioning?" "I didn't know it was this serious," he said. rubbing his temple. I'm sorry. We went back inside together. The house was quiet, too quiet. When I entered Lily's room, my breath caught. There were more drawings now, dozens of them, taped neatly to the walls. Each one showed a different family member. Some had too many arms. Others had hollow faces. One was just a silhouette with bleeding eyes. In every drawing, Lily stood in the middle, smiling, and at the bottom of each, she had written, "Welcome home." I tore the pictures down one by one. Greg picked up the last one, the most recent. It showed our family, Greg, Lily, and me, sitting at the dinner table. Behind us stood the other family, watching from the shadows, watching with smiles far too wide. Greg stared at the image, then turned it over. A message had been scrawled in red crayon. Don't lock them out. They remember. I felt something shift then, a coldness in the air, a creak from above. Greg looked at me. Did you hear that? We both turned our eyes to the ceiling. The attic. The attic door loomed above us like a gaping mouth. Greg grabbed the cord and pulled. With a creak and a cloud of dust, the folding stairs descended. A slow, cold draft spilled down, carrying a scent like old wood and wet earth. I didn't want to go up there, but I also knew we had to. Greg went first, flashlight in hand. I followed, every step groaning under my weight. Lily stayed downstairs, curled in the corner of the hallway, clutching her stuffed rabbit. The attic was bigger than I expected, longer, deeper, boxes, old furniture covered in sheets, a rocking chair facing the far wall, and in the center, drawn in chalk on the floor, was a circle. Not just a circle, symbols, runes, spirals. They looked burned into the wood, though no flame had touched them. Greg crouched near the edge. This isn't from the previous owners. He picked up something beside the circle, a doll's head. Its eyes had been gouged out, and then the rocking chair creaked. Slowly, it began to move. Greg and I froze. Then we heard it, a voice, small, thin, and coming from behind the chair. Mommy, you came back. Greg stepped forward. I grabbed his arm. Don't! But it was too late. He turned the chair. Nothing there, just dust. And then something crawled across the ceiling. I screamed as it darted from rafter to rafter. Thin, pale limbs, too fast to follow, its eyes shining like wet marbles. Greg fell backwards. What the hell is that? The creature dropped behind the boxes. We ran, down the stairs, through the hallway, past Lily. I scooped her into my arms, heart pounding. Greg slammed the front door behind us and locked it, as if a deadbolt could keep that out. We drove anywhere, nowhere. Lily sobbed quietly in the back seat. Did it talk to you? I asked. She nodded. It said we left it behind. It said it wants to come home. Greg gripped the wheel. That room wasn't just hidden. It was sealed. On purpose, and someone unsealed it. I whispered. He didn't answer, because we both knew the truth. It had always been there. It was just waiting for someone to open the door. We checked into a roadside motel 2 towns over. Greg didn't speak. Lily wouldn't let go of my hand. I didn't sleep. Instead, I sat by the window and scrolled through every piece of paper we'd brought from the house, inspection reports, old tax records, photographs from the listing. I was hoping to find a name, a clue, anything that made sense of what we had just seen. That's when I saw it, a blurry figure in the background of one of the house photos. Up in the attic window. I zoomed in. It was a child, pale, watching from the shadows, except that photo had been taken during the day, long before we ever moved in. Greg woke up with a jolt. We can't go back there. No, I agreed, but we can find out who lived there before us. It took hours of digging, but we finally found a name, Margaret Elsie. She'd owned the house for nearly 30 years. Never married, no children listed. But there were mentions, whispers in old forums, local message boards, strange things, neighbors hearing music in the attic at night, seeing children's faces at the windows. The most disturbing was an old blog post from a neighbor dated 1994. That attic, I swear I heard someone talking to it, a kid's voice. But Margaret lived alone. She said it was the spirit of creativity. Said it helped her write. Greg read it aloud. She was an author? I nodded. A horror novelist. She stopped publishing in the 90s, right after her spirit told her to burn the last draft she wrote. We both stared at each other. Then Lily spoke, soft, flat, from her bed. I know her. I turned. Who, baby? The woman in the walls. She said she used to live with the little ones, but she couldn't take it anymore, so she helped them hide. Greg knelt beside her. Lily, what else did she say? Lily stared blankly at the ceiling. She said it wasn't done with us, that we let it out. And now, a pause, a tremble. Now it wants stories again. Greg stood up pale. What does that mean? I looked down at my phone. A new message had appeared. No number, just text. Write it, or I'll find someone who will. Abigail's voice echoed in my head as the room fell into silence. The air was thick, charged, as if the house itself was listening, waiting. She didn't look up at me as she spoke those words. She didn't have to. The way she held that pencil, it was like she already knew the ending. I staggered back from her room, heart pounding, unsure of what reality even meant anymore. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table, lit only by the dim glow of the stove clock. In front of me was an old, dusty notebook, the one I hadn't touched since college. I opened it. My hands shook as I wrote the first words. It started with a drawing. The moment my pen touched paper, I heard footsteps, light, barefoot, from the hallway. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. I knew it was her, not Abigail. Her, the woman in the mirror, the one Abigail had drawn with my face, only different. Keep going, she whispered. I kept writing. The more I wrote, the louder the house became. Floorboards creaked where no one stood. Drawers opened and shut. A baby cried. A man laughed. None of it was mine. None of it belonged to this life, but it was all familiar. Pages turned themselves, and as I wrote, the memories came back. Not memories I had lived, but ones someone else had left behind inside me. A different husband. Children I never gave birth to. A fire, a drowning, a door I should never have opened. When I looked up, the kitchen was no longer the same. It was Abigail's drawing. Walls crooked and pulsing like breathing skin. Cabinets bending at impossible angles. Shadows moving of their own accord. In the corner she sat. Not Abigail, the version of me Abigail had sketched. She smiled. I told you, she said. They were waiting. I dropped the notebook. The entire room convulsed, and then it stopped. Everything froze, like a paused VHS tape. The air, the sound, the shadows. Only I was moving. Only I was real, until Abigail stepped into the room. She was holding a new drawing. It was a portrait of me, but not how I looked now. It was how I felt, hollow, broken, stretched thin across too many lives and too many truths. Am I doing it right? She asked softly. I couldn't speak. She handed me the drawing and whispered, Finish it. Suddenly, I was in bed. Morning light bled through the blinds. Abigail was curled up next to me, asleep. No drawings, no voices, no shadows, just morning, just peace. But on my nightstand sat the notebook, open to the last page. A message scrawled in a child's uneven handwriting. Thank you for remembering us. And beneath it, one final drawing, our family. Not the one from reality, not the one I had raised, but the one she had drawn into existence. A family of strangers with my face and her hands. They were all smiling, and their eyes were wide open.